r/TrueOffMyChest X ran off with my sister, so I exposed his criminal past. X ran off with my sister, so I exposed his criminal past. I'm staring at my phone screen at 2 a.m., my finger hovering over the send button, and I know that once I press it, there's no going back. The anonymous email is loaded with everything: court documents, mugshots, police reports, all the dirty secrets Jake made me promise I'd never tell anyone. But that was before he decided to fuck my sister and run off to Vegas to marry her 3 weeks before our own wedding. God, I can't believe I'm actually typing this out. 2 months ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was marrying my best friend of 3 years, my sister Emma was my maid of honor, and my biggest worry was whether the florist would deliver the right shade of blush roses. Now I'm sitting in what was supposed to be our apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts I need to return, plotting to destroy the man I thought I'd spend my life with. It started with little things I chose to ignore. Jake staying late at work more often. Emma being weird and distant whenever we hung out. The way they both got quiet when I walked into rooms. I'm not stupid, I felt something was off, but I trusted them. What kind of person assumes their fiancé is sleeping with their own sister? The truth came out in the most humiliating way possible. I threw Jake a surprise birthday party last month, spent weeks planning it, invited everyone we knew. When he didn't come home by 8 p.m., I started calling around. His coworker Marcus looked genuinely confused when I asked if Jake was still at the office. Jake? He left hours ago. Said he had plans with Emma. That cold feeling in your stomach when you just know, but your brain refuses to process it? Yeah, that was me standing in our kitchen with 30 people waiting in our living room, slowly realizing why my sister hadn't shown up either. I found them at her apartment. Emma answered the door in one of Jake's shirts, and the look on her face told me everything. Not guilt, panic. Like she'd been caught shoplifting, not destroying her sister's entire life. Jake appeared behind her in his boxers, and for a moment, we all just stood there in this horrible tableau of betrayal. Mia, we can explain, Jake started, but what explanation exists for this? What possible justification is there for fucking your fiancé's sister behind her back for God knows how long? I didn't scream or cry or throw anything, though I wanted to. I just said, the party's at 8, turned around, and left. I went home and told 30 people that Jake got food poisoning. I smiled and played hostess and pretended everything was fine while dying inside. They were gone by Tuesday. Not just gone from my life, gone. Emma cleared out her apartment and quit her job. Jake packed his stuff while I was at work and left his key on the kitchen counter next to a handwritten letter I threw away without reading. My mom called crying, saying Emma had eloped in Vegas and they'd be traveling indefinitely. She actually asked me to be understanding because love is complicated. Love is complicated. That's what she said about my sister stealing my fiancé. So now here I am with this email, and Jake's new employer's address copied from LinkedIn, and every piece of documentation about his criminal past that he trusted me with. The fraud charges from when he was 23. The sealed juvenile record for theft that somehow I managed to get copies of. All of it. My finger's still hovering over that button. I pressed send. The whoosh sound of the email leaving my phone felt louder than it probably was in the dead silence of my apartment. 3 emails, actually. One to HR at Jake's new tech startup in Austin. One to the background check company they definitely used for hiring. And one to his direct supervisor whose email I found through some creative LinkedIn stalking. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. What the fuck did I just do? But I wasn't done. The emails were just the beginning. I'd spent weeks putting this together, going through old conversations, screenshots, photos. Jake had been so open with me about his past, especially after a few drinks. He told me about the fraud charges like they were just youthful mistakes, how he'd gotten caught up with the wrong crowd at 23, running credit card scams that netted him 15 grand before the FBI showed up at his door. The way he told it, he was practically a victim himself, just a naive kid who didn't know better. The juvenile record was harder to piece together, but Jake had let enough detail slip over 3 years. Theft charges at 16. Breaking into cars in his neighborhood, stealing whatever he could fence. His parents had money for good lawyers, so it got sealed, but he'd shown me the paperwork once when we were talking about how our past shapes us. I'd photographed it while he was in the bathroom, thinking it was just an interesting relationship artifact to keep. Now I uploaded everything to a burner Instagram account I created. Posted the court documents with his full name and new city tagged. Austin, Texas. His new employer tagged too. Hashtag criminal past, hashtag fraud, hashtag background check, hashtag beware of this man. The juvenile mugshot was particularly damning. Baby-faced Jake at 16, looking cocky even in police custody. I'd enhanced it, made sure his face was clearly visible, added text overlay with his current name and location. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mia, please call me. We need to talk. I know you're hurt, but... I deleted it without reading the rest and blocked her number. 6 weeks too late for conversations. But as I watched the posts go live, something twisted in my stomach. This felt bigger than I'd intended. More permanent. Jake was an asshole and a cheater, but those juvenile records were sealed for a reason. He'd been a kid. And the fraud charges, he'd served his probation, paid his restitution. Legally, he'd paid his debt. My mom called at 2:47 a.m. Mia, honey, I know you're upset about Emma, but someone's posting terrible things about Jake online. Emma's in hysterics. She thinks it might be someone who knows his criminal history? I cut her off. Gee, I wonder who that could be. Mia Elizabeth, please tell me you didn't. Didn't what? Tell the truth about the man who cheated on me with my sister? The man Emma married knowing he betrayed his last fiancé? Those records were sealed. He was a child. And the other charges were years ago, he's changed. He cheated on me with your daughter, Mom. With Emma. And you want me to protect his reputation? The silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Colder. Take it down, Mia. Whatever you've done, fix it. This isn't just about Jake anymore. Emma's involved now. She's family. So was I said, and hung up. But she was right about one thing. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. And sitting here in my dark apartment, watching the posts get shared and commented on by strangers, I was starting to realize I might have opened a door I couldn't close. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. The story was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. By morning, everything had spiraled completely out of control. I woke up to 247 notifications on my phone and a sick feeling in my stomach that told me I'd majorly fucked up. The Instagram posts had been shared to Twitter, TikTok, and somehow ended up on some local Austin Facebook groups. Hashtag Justice for Mia was trending alongside hashtag Criminal Exposed, which felt surreal and horrifying at the same time. But it was the comments that made my blood run cold. I know this guy. He applied to my company last month. Someone should warn his neighbors. Leopards don't change spots. Once a thief, always a thief. His poor wife probably doesn't even know. And then worse ones. People doxing his new address, his gym, the coffee shop where he apparently went every morning. Someone had found Emma's social media and was posting screenshots of their Vegas wedding photos with fire emojis and comments about how she married a criminal. This wasn't justice anymore. This was a mob. My phone rang. Unknown number with an Austin area code. Is this Mia Chen? The voice was professional, clipped. This is Detective Morrison with Austin PD. We need to discuss some posts that have come to our attention regarding Jake Stevens and what appears to be harassment and doxing activity. My mouth went completely dry. What? Mr. Stevens filed a complaint this morning. Claims his sealed juvenile records were illegally obtained and distributed online, along with what he's calling a coordinated harassment campaign. We'd like to ask you some questions. I hung up immediately, then panicked that hanging up made me look guilty. Which I was. Shit, was I guilty of something criminal? I'd just posted the truth, but those juvenile records, how had I even gotten those photos? 3 hours later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see 2 people in business casual with badges. Real badges. They weren't going away. Ms. Chen? I'm Detective Parker, this is Detective Morrison. We spoke earlier. May we come in? I let them in because refusing felt worse, and spent the next 45 minutes in the most surreal conversation of my life. They were actually pretty nice, which somehow made it more terrifying. We understand you've been through a difficult personal situation, Detective Parker said, sitting on my couch like we were having coffee. Betrayal like that can make people act impulsively. But distributing sealed juvenile records is a felony in Texas, Morrison added. Even if you obtained them legally in another state. And depending on how you got them. They didn't arrest me, but they made it clear this wasn't over. Jake could press charges. The state could press charges. And apparently, his new employer, the one I'd so carefully researched, was a government contractor. Background check fraud was serious business when federal contracts were involved. After they left, I sat on my floor and actually cried for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Not pretty crying, ugly, snotty, hyperventilating crying. I'd wanted Jake to face consequences. I'd wanted him to hurt like I was hurting. But I'd never meant for Emma to get dragged through hell online, or for cops to show up at my door, or for this to become some viral internet justice campaign that I couldn't control. My sister called from a blocked number that evening. Mia. Her voice was raw, exhausted. Please. People are showing up at our hotel. Someone found Jake's car and keyed it. This has to stop. I can't stop it, I whispered, and realized for the first time that was completely true. I can't stop it. It's everywhere now. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to destroy our lives. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, wondering if my sister was right. If I was the real monster here. The next morning brought a new nightmare I hadn't even considered. My boss called at 7 a.m. Mia, we need to talk. My office, 8:30. Karen's voice had that careful HR tone that meant I was absolutely fucked. I knew before I even walked in. Someone had connected the dots. My name was attached to those Instagram posts somehow, maybe through metadata, maybe through Jake's complaint to the police, maybe through some internet sleuth who'd gotten bored and decided to play detective. Sit down, Karen said, and I noticed our head of HR was there too. Never a good sign. We received some concerning information yesterday about your involvement in an ongoing cyberbullying situation. Cyberbullying. That's what they were calling it. A client forwarded us some social media posts that appear to trace back to you, targeting an individual's criminal history. I don't need to tell you how this reflects on our firm's reputation. The law firm. Of course. I worked for a prestigious family law practice, and here I was, making national news for what was essentially online vigilante justice. The irony was suffocating. I understand you're going through personal difficulties, HR lady, Janet, I think, chimed in. But we have to consider our other clients, our standing in the legal community. They didn't fire me. Not exactly. Voluntary leave of absence while they assessed the situation. Which meant they were waiting to see if I got arrested before deciding whether to fire me outright. I drove home in a daze, and that's when I saw them. 2 people with cameras sitting in a car across from my building. As soon as I pulled into my parking space, they were out and approaching. Mia Chen? I'm Rebecca Torres with Channel 8 News. Can we get a statement about the viral posts exposing Jake Stevens' criminal background? I ran. Literally ran from my car to the building entrance while this woman chased me with a microphone, asking if I had any regrets about my internet revenge campaign and whether I thought vigilante justice was appropriate for personal relationship disputes. The elevator doors closed on her, still shouting questions. But it got worse when I reached my apartment. A notice taped to my door from building management. Multiple complaints from other tenants about media harassment and unwanted attention. I was in violation of my lease terms about activities that disturbed other residents. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers, reporters, people wanting interviews. But buried in the chaos was a text from my mom that made my stomach drop. Your father wants you to come home. Family meeting tonight. Emma and Jake are driving up from Austin. A family meeting. With my sister and the man who destroyed my life, who was now apparently the victim in all this. I could picture it, me sitting across from them while my parents mediated like this was some kind of resolvable family dispute instead of a complete betrayal. But the worst part was the email I found when I finally checked my laptop. From Jake's lawyer. A cease and desist order. Demanding I remove all posts, stop any further defamatory activities, and threatening both civil and criminal action. The legal language was dense, but the threat was clear. They were coming for me with everything they had. Attached was a damages estimate that made me dizzy. Lost income from his job termination. Emotional distress for both him and Emma. Reputation damage. Legal fees. They were asking for $200,000 in damages, and that was just the starting point. I slammed the laptop shut and looked around my apartment, the apartment I might lose, in the building where I was no longer welcome, thinking about the job I'd probably lost and the family dinner where I'd have to face everyone who now thought I was the villain. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number, my dad. Mia, sweetheart, you need to come home. Tonight. This has gotten completely out of hand, and we need to figure out how to fix it before someone gets seriously hurt. Someone already got seriously hurt, Dad. Me. When my fiancé fucked my sister. Language, Mia. And yes, what they did was wrong, but what you've done. He sighed heavily. Just come home. Please. Before this gets any worse. I hung up and stared out my window at the reporters still lurking below, wondering if it was even possible for this to get any worse. I didn't go to the family meeting. Instead, I turned off my phone, closed my curtains, and spent the evening researching criminal defense lawyers because apparently that was my life now. By the third day of hiding in my apartment, living off DoorDash and whatever I could get delivered, I was going stir-crazy. The reporters had mostly moved on, but I was too paranoid to leave. That's when my landlord showed up. Ms. Chen, I'm sorry, but we need to discuss your lease situation. Mr. Rodriguez looked genuinely apologetic, which somehow made it worse. The other tenants are threatening to break their leases if this continues. I've got 3 families saying they don't feel safe with all the media attention. The reporters are gone, I said weakly. But the internet isn't. Someone posted our building address in connection with your situation. We've had people showing up taking pictures, posting on social media about where the revenge girlfriend lives. Mrs. Patterson in 4B found someone going through the mail looking for your apartment number. He handed me a formal notice. 30 days to vacate due to lease violations. Even if I fought it, did I really want to stay somewhere I wasn't wanted? That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown local number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mia? This is Sarah Chen from Channel 12. Different reporter, same predatory tone. We're doing a follow-up story on internet vigilante justice, and we'd love to get your side. The narrative right now is pretty one-sided. What narrative? I cut her off. Well, Jake Stevens did an interview yesterday. Very compelling stuff about rehabilitation, second chances, how people can change. He came across as really sympathetic, especially with your sister talking about the harassment they've been receiving. My blood went cold. What interview? It aired last night. Redemption and revenge, when past mistakes go viral. Got picked up nationally. Your ex-fiancé is basically the poster child for cancel culture gone wrong now. After I hung up, I spent 2 hours finding and watching the interview online. There was Jake, looking perfectly composed and heartbroken, sitting next to Emma who kept dabbing at her eyes with tissues. I made mistakes as a young person, he said directly to the camera. Serious mistakes that I paid for legally and have spent years making amends for. I thought I could move forward, build a new life, but someone I trusted used my past against me in the most vindictive way possible. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. And this happened because of your relationship ending? The relationship ending was painful for everyone involved, Emma chimed in, her voice shaking. But what happened afterward, having our private information spread across the internet, having strangers show up at our hotel, getting death threats, that's not justice. That's revenge. Death threats? I felt sick. I'd never wanted that. Jake continued, I understand Mia was hurt. But trying to destroy someone's life because a relationship didn't work out, that's not who I thought she was. The way he said my name, like it left a bad taste in his mouth. And Emma, nodding along like she hadn't participated in the betrayal that started everything. They looked like victims. Worse, they looked like sympathetic victims. The comments section was brutal, but not in the way I expected. Half were supporting them, calling me a psycho ex and saying Jake deserved privacy and second chances. The other half were still team revenge, but their comments were getting more extreme, more violent. People were talking about finishing what Mia started and making sure Jake never recovers from this. I'd created a monster I couldn't control, and now Jake and Emma were winning the PR war by looking reasonable while I hid in my apartment like a criminal. My phone rang again. This time it was my mom, and she sounded exhausted. Mia, honey, you need to make this stop. Emma's getting death threats. People are calling your father's business. This is affecting the whole family now. I can't make it stop, I whispered. I don't know how. Then maybe, she said quietly, you need to consider making it right. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a crisis management firm. The kind of company that helps politicians and celebrities when their careers implode. Because apparently, that's what my life had become. Ms. Chen, the consultant's voice was crisp, professional. I've reviewed your situation. I'll be frank, this is complicated. You're dealing with potential criminal charges, civil litigation, and a narrative that's gotten away from you completely. Can you fix it? Define fix. Can we manage the media attention? Possibly. Can we undo the damage to Mr. Stevens and your sister? No. Can we keep you out of prison? That depends on several factors we don't control. Prison. She said it so casually, like it was just another item on a checklist. The consultation fee alone was $3,000, money I definitely didn't have with my job situation imploding. The next morning brought a fresh nightmare I hadn't anticipated. My phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. My accounts had been frozen pending an investigation. Apparently, Jake's lawyers had gotten a court order, claiming I'd used shared credit cards to pay for the social media campaign and private investigator services I'd never actually hired. I hadn't used our shared cards for anything except groceries, but proving that meant I'd need a lawyer. Which required money. From accounts I couldn't access. My doorbell rang at noon. Not reporters this time, process servers. I was being sued not just by Jake, but by his new employer. The government contractor was claiming I'd interfered with their federal contracts by providing false information during their background verification process. False information. That's what they were calling the truth about Jake's criminal history. The papers were thick, dense with legal language I understood just enough to know I was completely fucked. They wanted damages, legal fees, and something called injunctive relief that seemed to mean they could control what I said about Jake for the rest of my life. But the worst part was buried on page 12. They were also suing my employer, claiming the law firm had been negligent in supervising an employee who had engaged in criminal harassment using her legal access to confidential information systems. I dragged my firm into this mess. People who'd never done anything to me were now dealing with lawsuits and bad publicity because I couldn't handle my personal life falling apart. My phone rang. Karen from work, and her voice was ice cold. Mia, I need you to come in immediately. We've received some very serious allegations that you may have used firm resources for personal matters. I didn't. Now, Mia. And bring any devices or passwords you've used for firm business. They thought I'd hacked into legal databases to get Jake's records. The irony was that I'd gotten everything the old-fashioned way, by dating him and taking pictures when he wasn't paying attention. But explaining that meant admitting I'd been planning this longer than I wanted to acknowledge, even to myself. 2 hours later, I walked out of the law firm for the last time, officially fired and potentially facing criminal charges for computer fraud I hadn't actually committed. My keycard was deactivated, my email was locked, and they'd confiscated my laptop pending their internal investigation. Standing on the sidewalk outside the building where I'd worked for 5 years, I realized I had nowhere to go. My apartment was compromised, my job was gone, my family thought I was a monster, and my bank accounts were frozen. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I wondered if I should just give up. Call Jake and Emma, apologize publicly, accept whatever consequences were coming. But then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your story. I had information about Jake you need to know. Meet me tonight. Another complication I definitely didn't need. But also, possibly, the first piece of good news I'd had in weeks. I stared at the text message for 20 minutes before responding. Meeting some random stranger who claimed to have information about Jake sounded like either a trap or the setup for a true crime podcast about my murder. But sitting in my car outside my former workplace, officially unemployed and potentially facing federal charges, I was running out of options. What kind of information? I texted back. The response came immediately, the kind that explains why he was really in Austin. Meet me at Riverside Diner on 5th Street. 7 p.m. Come alone. Against every instinct screaming at me to go home and hide under my covers, I drove to the diner. The woman waiting for me was not what I expected, mid-40s, professional looking, with tired eyes that suggested she'd been through her own version of hell. Mia? She stood up as I approached her booth. I'm Rebecca Martinez. Thank you for coming. I slid into the seat across from her, still wary. How do you know Jake? He worked for my company 6 months ago. Lasted exactly 3 weeks before we had to let him go. She pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between us. I saw the news coverage, saw him playing the victim, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. My heart started racing. Let him go for what? Corporate theft. Nothing we could prove definitively, which is why he wasn't arrested, but money went missing from client accounts he had access to. Small amounts, spread across multiple accounts, very sophisticated. She opened the folder and showed me internal company memos. We suspected him immediately, but Jake's smart. He'd learned from his previous arrests. I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. But he got the job in Austin. Because we couldn't prove anything, we couldn't put it on his employment record. When they called for references, HR could only confirm dates of employment and that he wasn't eligible for rehire. They assumed it was personality conflicts or poor performance. Why are you telling me this? Rebecca's expression darkened. Because my daughter worked in that department. 18 years old, first job out of high school. When the missing money was discovered, she was questioned by police for 6 hours. She quit and won't even apply for other jobs now because she's terrified of background checks. Jake destroyed an innocent kid's confidence to cover his own tracks. She pulled out more papers, bank records, internal audit reports, emails discussing the investigation. I'd been waiting for him to slip up again so I could connect the dots for law enforcement. But then I saw him on TV, talking about redemption and second chances, and I realized he's probably already moved on to his next victim. His new employer. I started. Government contractor, right? With access to sensitive financial systems? Rebecca nodded grimly. I called them yesterday, but they said they couldn't comment on personnel matters. Apparently, Jake's convinced them he's being harassed by a vindictive ex. The bitter irony hit me like a truck. While I was being painted as an obsessive stalker for exposing Jake's past crimes, he was potentially committing new ones. My illegal revenge might have been the only thing standing between Jake and whatever damage he could do with government contract access. What do you want me to do with this? I asked. I want you to give it to the right people. The police, the FBI, whoever's investigating the background check situation. Because if Jake's running the same scam on a federal contractor that he ran on us. She paused. That's not just theft anymore. That's potentially treason territory. As she gathered her papers to leave, Rebecca looked me straight in the eye. I don't know what happened between you and Jake personally, and frankly it's none of my business. But what you did, exposing his pattern, that might have saved a lot of people from becoming his next victims. Walking back to my car with a folder clutched against my chest, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, vindication. Maybe my methods were wrong, maybe I'd broken laws and destroyed relationships, but I'd also accidentally prevented something much worse. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, I answered immediately. Ms. Chen? This is Agent Williams with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I think we need to talk. The FBI office was nothing like I expected. No dramatic interrogation rooms with two-way mirrors, just a sterile conference room with fluorescent lighting and the smell of burnt coffee. Agent Williams looked like someone's suburban dad, complete with a coffee-stained tie and reading glasses hanging around his neck. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming in voluntarily, he said, settling across from me with a thick file. We've been investigating some irregularities at Meridian Defense Solutions. Mr. Stevens' current employer, and your situation, has provided some interesting context. I slid Rebecca's folder across the table. I think this might be relevant. Agent Williams opened it and his eyebrows shot up. For the next hour, I watched him cross-reference Rebecca's documents with whatever was in his file. The silence was excruciating. Ms. Chen, I need to be clear about something, he finally said. You're still facing potential charges for the distribution of sealed records. That hasn't changed. But this information suggests a pattern that extends well beyond your personal situation. What kind of pattern? The kind that makes Jake Stevens a person of significant interest in a federal investigation. He leaned back in his chair. We've been tracking unusual financial activity at 3 government contractors over the past 18 months. Small amounts, multiple accounts, very sophisticated methodology. My stomach dropped. 3 companies? Meridian Defense is just the latest. The previous 2 couldn't prove anything definitively, but the pattern. He gestured to Rebecca's documents. Your friend isn't the only former employer who's reached out since your story went viral. Agent Williams pulled out his phone and showed me a news article I hadn't seen. Posted this morning. FBI investigates defense contractor following viral criminal exposure. Jake's situation has officially gone federal. The headline made me dizzy. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. I'd accidentally stumbled into exposing what might be a multi-million-dollar fraud operation targeting government contracts. What does this mean for me? I asked. That's complicated. On one hand, you potentially aided a federal investigation. On the other hand, you still violated several laws getting there. Agent Williams closed the files. I can't make any promises, but cooperation tends to be viewed favorably by prosecutors. Cooperation meaning what? Meaning we might need your help understanding Jake's methods, his psychology, how he operates. You knew him intimately for 3 years. That's valuable insight. Walking out of the FBI building, my head was spinning. In the span of 2 weeks, I'd gone from heartbroken bride-to-be to criminal defendant to potential federal witness. My phone had 17 missed calls from reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the FBI angle. But the call that made my blood freeze was from my mom. Mia, Emma's in the hospital. What happened? Someone recognized her at a grocery store in Austin. Started following her, screaming about how she married a criminal. She had a panic attack so severe they had to sedate her. Mom's voice was shaking. The doctors say she's developed acute anxiety disorder. She can't leave their apartment anymore. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Whatever Emma had done to me, she didn't deserve to be trapped in her own home, afraid to buy groceries because strangers might attack her in public. Mom, The family meeting is tomorrow, Mia. 1 o'clock. Your father's house. Emma and Jake will be there via video call because she can't travel. This ends now, one way or another. After she hung up, I sat in my car outside the FBI building and realized I was facing an impossible choice. I could cooperate with a federal investigation and potentially send Jake to prison, destroying what was left of my relationship with Emma and my family forever. Or I could stay quiet, let him potentially get away with defrauding the government, and try to salvage whatever family connections might still exist. My phone buzzed with a text from the crisis management consultant, saw the FBI news. My rates just doubled. Call me. Even the people trying to help me were treating this like an opportunity. But it was the email waiting when I got home that really broke me. From Jake's lawyer, sent an hour ago, in light of recent federal developments, our client is prepared to discuss a mutual resolution that serves everyone's interests. Jake wanted to make a deal. After everything, the betrayal, the lawsuits, the media circus, he was ready to negotiate. The question was whether I was ready to sit across from him and my sister and pretend we could somehow fix this mess without destroying each other completely. The family meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock, but I showed up at my dad's house at noon, needing the extra time to prepare myself for what was about to happen. Dad answered the door looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Mia, sweetheart. He pulled me into a hug that felt desperate. We're going to figure this out, okay? We're going to fix this. But I could see in his eyes that he had no idea how. The dining room was set up like a corporate mediation, laptops positioned so Emma and Jake could join by video call, legal pads scattered around the table, a box of tissues strategically placed in the center. Mom was already there, red-eyed and clutching her coffee mug like a lifeline. Before they call in, Dad said, settling into his chair at the head of the table, I need to know what you're thinking, Mia. The FBI, the investigation, your mother says you might be cooperating with them? I don't know yet. The truth was, Agent Williams had scheduled another meeting for Monday, and I still hadn't decided what I was going to tell him. It's complicated. Complicated how? Mom's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Emma can't leave her apartment. She's on anxiety medication. She lost 15 pounds because she's too scared to go grocery shopping. How is any of this worth it? Before I could answer, Dad's laptop chimed with an incoming call. Jake's face filled the screen, looking haggard but determined. Emma appeared beside him, and the sight of my sister made my chest tighten. She was pale, hollow-eyed, wearing a hoodie pulled up despite being indoors. Hey, Jake said, his voice carefully neutral. Thank you all for setting this up. The awkwardness was suffocating. For people who used to share holidays and family dinners, now arranged like opposing legal teams. So, Dad cleared his throat. I think we all want the same thing here, to find a way forward that stops the damage to everyone involved. The damage? I couldn't help myself. You mean the damage from me telling the truth about what Jake did? Mia, Emma spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. What we did to you was wrong. Jake and I both know that. But this, she gestured weakly at the screen. People are calling me a whore online. They're posting my workplace address, my photo. I can't even order food delivery because I'm scared the driver will recognize me. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, but it mixed with anger in a way that made me feel sick. You think I wanted that for you? I think you wanted us to suffer, Jake said quietly. And we are. Mission accomplished. Jake. Mom's voice carried a warning tone. No, it's okay, he continued, looking directly into the camera at me. I deserve Mia's anger. I betrayed her trust, I hurt her in the worst possible way. But Emma doesn't deserve what's happening to her. And my 18-year-old cousin doesn't deserve getting death threats because someone found her social media and decided she must be involved somehow. My stomach dropped. What 18-year-old cousin? Jess. Someone doxed my entire family tree. She's getting messages telling her to kill herself because she's related to me. She's a college freshman who's never even met you, Mia. The room went silent. I felt like I was going to be sick. Emma leaned forward, her face filling more of the screen. Mia, I know you think I'm just Jake's victim now, that I got what I deserved. But innocent people are getting hurt. Kids are getting hurt. When does it stop? When Jake stops lying about who he is, I said, but even as the words came out, they felt hollow. The FBI has evidence. The FBI has an investigation that may or may not lead anywhere, Jake interrupted. But what's definitely happening is that people are getting hurt right now, today, because of what you started. Dad held up his hand. Okay, let's focus on solutions. Jake, you mentioned your lawyer wanted to discuss a resolution? We dropped the civil suit. All of it. The damages, the injunctions, everything. In exchange, Mia makes a public statement that this was about our personal relationship, not about warning people about criminal behavior. She clarifies that the federal investigation is separate from her actions. Basically, you want me to lie, I said. I want you to stop pretending this was about justice when it was about revenge. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Because he wasn't wrong, it had started as revenge. But now, with the FBI investigation, with Rebecca's evidence, it felt like something bigger. What if I said no? I asked. Emma's face crumpled. Then I guess we'll all just keep destroying each other until there's nothing left. The silence stretched across the video call until my phone rang, cutting through the tension like a blade. Agent Williams' name flashed on the screen. I need to take this, I said, stepping away from the table despite my family's protests. Ms. Chen, we have a problem. Agent Williams' voice was tight. Jake Stevens' lawyer contacted the Bureau this morning, claiming you're interfering with their client's cooperation in our investigation. My blood went cold. What cooperation? Apparently, Mr. Stevens reached out to us yesterday offering to provide information about financial irregularities at his previous employers. His attorney is now claiming that your continued public statements are jeopardizing his client's safety and his ability to assist federal law enforcement. I walked further from the dining room, my voice dropping to a whisper. He's lying. He's trying to flip the script and make himself look like the whistleblower. That may be true, but here's the problem, we can't have competing witnesses whose credibility undermines each other. If you're both claiming to be cooperating with us, and you're in active litigation with each other, it compromises the integrity of our investigation. The implications hit me like a truck. Jake was trying to cut me out of the federal case entirely, positioning himself as the reformed criminal turned cooperative witness while painting me as the vindictive ex who couldn't let go. What does that mean for me? It means you need to decide what's more important, your personal vendetta or a federal investigation that could prevent future victims. Agent Williams paused. I'll be frank, Ms. Chen. If Stevens provides substantial cooperation and you're seen as the obstacle to that cooperation, prosecutors are going to view your situation very differently. I hung up and stood in my parents' hallway, staring at family photos from when everything was normal, trying to process what Jake had just done. He found a way to weaponize the federal investigation against me, making my cooperation look vindictive while his looked noble. When I returned to the dining room, 4 sets of eyes were watching me with expressions ranging from concern to suspicion. Who was that? Mom asked. The FBI. Jake's apparently offered to cooperate with their investigation. I looked directly at the laptop screen. Funny how you didn't mention that during your proposal for resolution. Jake had the grace to look uncomfortable. My lawyer advised me to explore all options for moving forward constructively. Moving forward constructively, I repeated. Is that what you call trying to sabotage my cooperation with federal law enforcement? Mia, Dad's voice carried a warning tone. What exactly is your cooperation with the FBI? The question hung in the air, and I realized I was at a crossroads I hadn't seen coming. My family was looking at me like I might be the one who'd lost perspective, not Jake. Like my refusal to let this go was the real problem. They want information about Jake's methods, his psychology. I knew him for 3 years. Stop, Emma's voice cracked through the laptop speakers. Just stop, Mia. Listen to yourself. You're talking about helping the FBI build a case against my husband. Your husband is a criminal, Emma. Your husband, Mom said quietly, was supposed to be the same person 3 months ago. The truth of that statement hit harder than any accusation. They weren't wrong. I was asking my family to accept that the man I'd been planning to marry, the man I'd brought to every family dinner for 3 years, was someone they should now consider a dangerous criminal. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about FBI cooperation. Have information about other Stevens victims. Don't let him control the narrative. Another complication. Another voice claiming to have the real truth about Jake. But looking at Emma's face on the screen, gaunt, exhausted, scared, I wondered if I was fighting so hard to be right that I'd forgotten what the cost of being right actually was. I need some air, I said, standing up abruptly from the dining room table. The walls felt like they were closing in, and Emma's hollow face on the laptop screen was making it impossible to think clearly. Mia, we're not done here, Dad called after me, but I was already heading for the back door. I sat on the porch steps where Emma and I used to plot our childhood schemes, staring at the text about other Stevens victims while my family continued their video conference inside. Through the window, I could see Mom gesturing emphatically at the laptop while Jake's pixelated face responded with what looked like reasonable explanations for everything. The unknown number texted again. I'm parked at the end of your parents' street. Blue Honda. We need to talk before you make any decisions. This was insane. I was meeting random strangers in parking lots like some kind of conspiracy theorist, while my sister had panic attacks and my family fell apart. But something about Jake's sudden cooperation with the FBI felt wrong. Too convenient. Too perfectly timed to undermine my own position. I walked to the blue Honda, and the woman who rolled down the window looked familiar in a way I couldn't place. You're Mia, right? I'm Jessica Torres. I was Jake's landlord in Phoenix, about 4 years ago. Phoenix. Jake had mentioned living there briefly, but he'd always been vague about why he left. He rented my guest house for 6 months, Jessica continued, glancing nervously at my parents' house. Seemed like a nice guy, paid rent on time, very charming. Until the check started bouncing. My stomach tightened. What happened? He'd been writing checks from a closed account for 2 months. When I confronted him, he had this whole story about banking errors, promised to fix everything immediately. Then he disappeared overnight, left all his stuff, owed me $3,000. She handed me a folder through the car window. But that's not the worst part. After he left, I found out he'd been using my address to open credit cards. Lots of them. I spent a year fighting with credit companies and dealing with collections calls. I flipped through the documents, credit applications, collection notices, police reports. All with Jake's name and Jessica's address. Why didn't you press charges? I tried. But Jake's smart, he never technically claimed to live there permanently, so the credit applications weren't technically fraud. The police said it was a civil matter. Jessica's hands gripped the steering wheel. I've been watching the news coverage, seeing him play the victim, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. How many other people are there? I've been in contact with 7 others since your story broke. Landlords, employers, even an ex-girlfriend from college. Same pattern, financial manipulation, then disappearing when confronted. She started her car. That FBI agent you're working with? You should ask him about the Phoenix PD reports from 2019. Jake didn't just leave Phoenix because of me. As Jessica drove away, I stared at the folder in my hands. 7 other victims. A pattern going back to college. This wasn't just about recent fraud charges. Jake had been running scams for over a decade. My phone rang. Emma's number. Mia, where did you go? Everyone's worried. Her voice was steadier now, like the video call had given her some strength back. I'm at the end of the street. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Has Jake ever asked you to put anything in your name? Credit cards, loans, apartment leases? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Emma? Why would you ask that? Her voice was smaller now, uncertain. Because I think there are things about Jake that you don't know. Things that go way beyond what he told me. Mia, don't do this. Don't try to turn me against him because you can't let go. Check your credit report, I interrupted. Tonight. Check every account that's been opened in your name in the last 6 months. I hung up before she could argue and walked back toward the house, Jessica's folder clutched against my chest. Through the window, I could see my parents and Jake still talking on the laptop, probably wondering where I'd gone and whether I was about to create another scene. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a clear direction. This wasn't about revenge anymore, or even about my broken engagement. If Jake was running the same con on Emma that he'd run on 7 other people, then my sister wasn't his wife, she was his next victim. And I was possibly the only person who could prove it before he destroyed her life the way he destroyed mine. I walked back into the house clutching Jessica's folder, but the dining room was empty except for my parents staring at a blank laptop screen. Where did they go? I asked. Emma had another panic attack, Mom said, her voice flat with exhaustion. Jake had to end the call to take care of her. They'll call back tomorrow. Dad closed the laptop with more force than necessary. Mia, I don't know what you were doing out there, but this needs to stop. Your sister is falling apart, our family is being dragged through the mud, and you're still chasing shadows. I'm not chasing shadows. I set Jessica's folder on the table. There are at least 7 other people Jake has scammed over the years. Landlords, employers. Stop. Mom held up her hand. Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You're collecting evidence like you're building a criminal case against your sister's husband. Because I am building a criminal case. Against family, Mia. Dad's voice cracked. Against your own sister. What happens to Emma when Jake goes to prison? What happens to her if you're right about all this? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. I hadn't thought past proving Jake was a fraud. I hadn't considered that destroying him meant destroying Emma's entire life too. My phone buzzed. Agent Williams. Miss Chen, we need to meet tomorrow morning. Early. There have been some developments in the Stevens case that complicate your situation considerably. What kind of developments? The kind that suggest Mr. Stevens might not be the only person of interest in our investigation anymore. My blood went cold. What does that mean? It means someone's been asking questions about your access to sealed records, your methods for obtaining financial information, and whether you might have had inside help from your law firm. Agent Williams paused. There's a theory developing that you're not just a jilted ex-girlfriend, that you might be a competing criminal who got caught. The room started spinning. That's insane. I never. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Miss Chen. Federal building. And bring a lawyer. I hung up and found my parents staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not anger or disappointment, fear. Mia, Dad said carefully, what exactly did you do to get Jake's records? Nothing illegal. I took pictures when we were dating, I saved conversations. Sealed juvenile records don't just appear in someone's photo gallery, Mom interrupted. Those are stored in secure databases. How did you really get them? The accusation in her voice felt like a slap. My own parents were starting to suspect I'd committed crimes beyond what they already knew about. You think I'm some kind of master hacker? I laughed, but it came out bitter and hollow. You think I broke into government databases to frame my cheating ex? I think, Dad said quietly, that we don't know what you're capable of anymore. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Emma, calling from Jake's number. Mia. Her voice was shaky but determined. I checked my credit report like you said. My heart stopped. And? There are 3 credit cards I didn't open. A car loan for a vehicle I've never seen. And a lease for an apartment in Dallas I've never been to. Emma's breathing was rapid, panicked. Jake's at the store. He doesn't know I found this. Mia, what do I do? The triumph I should have felt was overwhelmed by terror for my sister. Jake wasn't just a cheater or even just a con artist, he was actively destroying Emma's financial future while she recovered from anxiety attacks in their apartment. Emma, you need to leave. Right now, before he gets back. Leave and go where? I don't have any money. These cards he opened, they're maxed out. He's been spending thousands of dollars on things I never saw. Come home. Come to Mom and Dad's. What if you're wrong about this? What if there's an explanation? But Emma's voice was breaking. She knew there wasn't an explanation. My phone beeped with another call. Agent Williams again. Ms. Chen, don't answer any more questions from anyone until we meet tomorrow. And Ms. Chen? Don't contact Jake Stevens or his wife. That's not a suggestion. The federal agent was telling me to stay away from my own sister while she discovered her husband had been systematically destroying her credit. The same sister my parents thought I should stop trying to protect. I hung up on Agent Williams and immediately called Emma back, but it went straight to voicemail. The silence felt ominous. Jake must have returned from the store. I have to go check on her, I told my parents, grabbing my keys. Absolutely not, Dad stood up, blocking my path to the door. The FBI just told you to stay away, and Emma needs space to figure this out with her husband. Her husband who's been stealing her identity while she has panic attacks. Alleged identity theft, Mom corrected. We don't know Jake's side of this yet. I stared at my parents in disbelief. Even with evidence of financial fraud, they were still giving Jake the benefit of the doubt while treating me like a dangerous obsessive. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Emma. Using neighbor's phone. Jake found the credit reports. He's angry. Can you come get me? That's it, I'm going. I pushed past Dad toward the door. Mia, if you go over there against FBI orders, you could be arrested for interfering with their investigation, Mom called after me. But I was already in my car, driving toward Austin with Emma's text burning in my mind. Jake was angry that she discovered his fraud, which told me everything I needed to know about his reaction to being caught. Halfway there, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Mia Chen? The voice was professionally cold. This is Detective Morrison with Austin PD. We have your sister here asking for a ride, and your name came up as her emergency contact. My heart stopped. Is she okay? What happened? She's unharmed, but there was a domestic disturbance at her apartment. Neighbors called about shouting, possible violence. When we arrived, Ms. Stevens was in the hallway with a suitcase, claiming she needed to leave immediately. Where's Jake? Mr. Stevens is cooperating with our questions about some financial irregularities Miss Stevens brought to our attention. But here's the problem, we can't release her to you. Why not? Because Jake Stevens' attorney contacted us an hour ago claiming you've been stalking and harassing his client. There's apparently a federal investigation where you're a person of interest. We can't facilitate contact between you and the Stevens family. The system was protecting Jake even as Emma tried to escape from him. His lawyer had been thorough, painting me as the threat while Jake positioned himself as the victim of both my harassment and Emma's hysteria. Can I at least talk to her? She specifically asked me to tell you something. Detective Morrison paused. She said to give Jessica's folder to Agent Williams, and that she's sorry she didn't believe you sooner. The line went dead, leaving me pulled over on the side of the highway, completely helpless to protect my sister from a man who was systematically destroying her life. When I got home, my parents were waiting with grim expressions and a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Mia, this is David Chen, no relation, Dad said. He's a criminal defense attorney. Your parents called me after that FBI conversation, David explained, standing to shake my hand. We need to talk immediately about your legal situation, because it's significantly worse than you understand. How much worse? The kind of worse where the federal government is building a case that you and Jake Stevens were partners in a sophisticated fraud scheme, and your public feud is just a cover story to throw off investigators. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into the nearest chair. That's insane. Insane, but surprisingly logical from a prosecutor's perspective, David continued, settling across from me with a legal pad. Think about it, you had access to sealed records through unexplained means, you knew intimate details of Jake's methods, and your timing perfectly disrupted multiple federal investigations into his activities. I'm the one who helped start those investigations. Or you're a criminal who got caught and decided to throw your partner under the bus first. David's expression was sympathetic but serious. Mia, tomorrow's FBI meeting isn't about cooperation anymore. It's about determining whether to arrest you. As if summoned by his words, my phone rang with a call that made my blood freeze. Jake's number. Don't answer that, David warned, but I was already picking up. Mia. Jake's voice was different, cold, calculating. We need to meet. Tonight. Just you and me, no lawyers, no FBI agents. Because if we don't figure this out together, we're both going to prison. I stared at my phone, Jake's words echoing in my head while David frantically shook his head and mouthed hang up. But something in Jake's tone, desperate, almost panicked, made me hesitate. What do you mean we're both going to prison? I asked. Not over the phone. Meet me at Riverside Park, the pavilion where we had our first date. 1 hour. Come alone, or the FBI gets a very interesting story about how you've been blackmailing me for months. The line went dead. David immediately grabbed my phone and started scrolling through the call log. Absolutely not, he said firmly. Meeting with him without counsel present would be legal suicide. He's obviously trying to manipulate you into. Into what? He's the one with everything to lose here. I stood up, pacing around my parents' living room. Emma's with the police, his fraud is being exposed, the FBI is investigating him. What leverage does he possibly have? David exchanged a look with my parents that made my stomach drop. Mia, sit down. There's something we haven't told you yet. Dad pulled out his laptop and opened an email. This came through your father's business account an hour ago. From Jake's attorney. The email was brief but devastating. Jake's legal team had compiled what they called evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy between Jake and me. Screenshots of text messages that appeared to show me giving Jake advice on how to avoid background checks. Bank records suggesting I'd received payments from accounts tied to his fraudulent activities. Even a recorded phone conversation where a voice that sounded like mine was coaching someone on identity theft techniques. This is all fake, I whispered, but even as I said it, I could see how convincing it looked. He's fabricated everything. Maybe, David said gently. But fabricated evidence that looks as good takes time and expertise to create. Jake didn't pull this together overnight. He's been building a defense strategy that implicates you for weeks, possibly months. Mom was crying quietly in the corner. Mia, honey, why would he do this? If you were partners, why would he try so hard to drag you down with him? The answer hit me like a physical blow. Because I know too much. I know about the Phoenix landlord, the previous employers, the pattern going back years. If I testify against him, he goes away for decades. But if I'm his co-conspirator instead of his victim, then your testimony becomes worthless, David finished. And he can plea bargain his way to a few years maximum while you take the fall for being the mastermind. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, 45 minutes. Don't bring your lawyer boyfriend. I have recordings of every conversation we've had for the past month, including some very interesting ones about federal evidence tampering. He's been recording me? I looked at David in horror. Is that legal? In Texas? Unfortunately, yes. Single-party consent state. David was already packing his briefcase. We're going to the FBI right now, tonight, before this gets any worse. But my phone rang again before we could leave. Agent Williams. Ms. Chen, we just received some very disturbing information from Mr. Stevens' attorney. I'm going to ask you directly, have you been coaching Mr. Stevens on how to avoid federal detection while committing financial crimes? No. He's lying, he's trying to frame me. Because we have recordings that suggest otherwise. Recordings where you appear to be giving very specific advice about financial fraud techniques. Agent Williams' voice was ice cold. Don't leave your location tonight, Ms. Chen. We'll be issuing a warrant for your arrest first thing in the morning. The call ended, leaving me staring at my family and lawyer in complete shock. Jake hadn't just been planning a defense, he'd been planning to destroy me so thoroughly that no one would believe a word I said about his crimes. 40 minutes, David said, checking his watch. We have 40 minutes to figure out how to prove your innocence before the federal government decides you're a career criminal. But as I looked at Jake's text again, a terrible thought occurred to me. What if meeting him wasn't about getting manipulated? What if it was about getting him to confess to the frame job while I recorded him? What if Jake's trap could become his downfall instead? I made a decision that probably saved my life and definitely changed everything. Instead of going to meet Jake alone like he demanded, I called Agent Williams back. I want to wear a wire, I said before he could speak. Jake's trying to frame me, and I can prove it. 3 hours later, I was sitting in that park pavilion with a recording device taped to my chest, watching Jake approach through the darkness. He looked terrible, hollow-eyed, desperate, nothing like the confident man who'd manipulated his way through years of fraud. You came, he said, sliding onto the picnic table bench across from me. You said we'd both go to prison if we didn't figure this out. I kept my voice steady, knowing Agent Williams and his team were listening from a van 50 yards away. What did you mean? Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Come on, Mia. You're smarter than that. You think the FBI believes your innocent victim act? They know you had to have inside help getting those records. Because you told them I did. Because it's obvious. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Nobody gets sealed juvenile records by taking pictures during pillow talk. You had access through your law firm, and we both know it. The recording device felt like it was burning against my skin. So you decided to make me your partner retroactively? I decided to survive. And if that means you take some heat for the records thing while I take responsibility for the financial stuff, then that's fair. We're both guilty of something. Except I'm not guilty of anything. Jake's expression shifted, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man who'd convinced me to trust him, who'd made my sister fall in love with him. Mia, listen to me carefully. I have recordings of you coaching me on avoiding background checks. I have bank records showing payments from my accounts to yours. I have emails you sent with advice on financial fraud. All fabricated. All convincing enough to put you away for 20 years. He pulled out his phone and played an audio clip that made my blood freeze. It was my voice, clear as day, explaining how to use false addresses for credit applications. But I recognized the conversation. It was from 8 months ago, when Jake had asked me hypothetical questions about identity theft for what he claimed was a cybersecurity presentation at work. He'd recorded me and then edited out his questions, making it sound like I was giving criminal advice instead of explaining legal concepts. You've been planning this for months, I whispered. I've been planning for every contingency, Jake corrected. Including the possibility that my past would catch up with me and I'd need someone else to blame. The admission hung in the air between us, and I knew Agent Williams had everything he needed. But Jake wasn't done. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell the FBI that we were partners, that you helped me identify targets and access records. In exchange, I'll make sure Emma's credit gets restored and her name gets cleared of any financial damage. You're using my sister as leverage? I'm offering you a way to save her and minimize your own sentence. Take the deal, Mia, because the alternative is that you go down for everything while I walk away with a slap on the wrist. The park lights illuminated his face, and I saw him clearly for the first time, not the charming man I'd fallen in love with, not even the cheater who'd broken my heart, but a predator who'd been manipulating everyone around him for years. No, I said simply. 20 minutes later, Jake Stevens was in FBI custody, and I was finally free. The recording was everything Agent Williams needed to unravel Jake's fabricated evidence and expose the full scope of his fraud operation. Emma's charges were dropped, the civil suits against me were dismissed, and Jake was facing federal charges that would put him away for decades. 6 months later, I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. Emma and I are in therapy together, working through the betrayal and manipulation we both experienced. She's moved back home and started over completely, new job, new city, new everything. The hardest part wasn't the legal consequences or even the media attention. It was accepting that someone I trusted completely had been planning to destroy me almost from the beginning. But maybe that's the lesson here, that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we never suspected could. Jake's in federal prison now. Emma's healing. My family's back together. And I finally understand the difference between justice and revenge. Justice required patience, evidence, and trusting the system to work. Revenge nearly destroyed everyone I cared about, including myself. I still don't regret exposing the truth. I just wish I'd found a way to do it that didn't almost cost me everything else.